joining us from somewhere around this entire globe. And it's not flat either. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have went there. Somewhere around the globe, it's Mike from around the world. Mike, how you doing?
God bless you, Pastor Paul. Doing good tonight.
All right. Now, Mike, I titled this show, helicopters, planes, the stock market, everything seems to be crashing down around us. It's a terrible thing that happened in Hudson River. This helicopter just falls out of the sky. I don't know what caused that. Maybe it was mechanical. They said they heard an explosion. Someone did. And then about the same time that happened, Mike, there was an airplane sitting on the runway there in Washington, D.C. with 6 members of Congress, and its wing got clipped by another plane.
Yeah.
And this is really, this is just a couple things. And then there was a plane that fell out of the sky in just outside of Little Rock, Arkansas, and there was a plane also that crashed over Missouri. This is just today. Mike, what's going on?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, their maintenance program and some of the shifty work that's been going on behind the scenes has cost people their lives. It's funny how some of the whistleblowers of some of these aircraft manufacturers, they blow the whistle and then die.
Wow.
It's been like 12 people who have, been taken out. They tell on the aircraft manufacturers.
Yeah.
They're met by, hostilities, and then all of a sudden they're gone.
12 of them?
Some of the if you start looking at some of these aircraft and some of the failures that they're having, it's almost like something is super corroding. Some of the materials, the maintenance is poor. And I think it's a product of this. I think it's a product of people have attempted to maximize profits so much at the expense, right, of safety. I really do. Greed has caused some of it. Some of it is spoofing, but greed has caused a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
Aircraft maintenance is, aircraft maintenance costs. If you're going to have an aircraft, you have to check that thing. You have to replace parts. You have to do a lot of things all the time. It's not like a vehicle. You have to replace parts on those things, and they're just not doing it. And then ATC, air traffic control, they're trying to make these guys work, 2 and 3 shifts. Yeah. That's unthinkable. That's unthinkable. Yeah.
And then you also don't forget that we've had naval ships getting crashed into by, cargo. Yep. I mean, this is wild. I mean, and I'm starting to wonder, that helicopter that hit that plane, and, was there somebody hacking?
I believe that was spoofed. Yeah. I believe that was spoofed. I really do. I believe that was spoofed. There is a, cybersecurity for aircraft and transmission security, and, netting and earthing and all these techniques they use for communication. It's imperative that they really do, they have to stay on top of that. I think for a long time, the civilian sector is starting to outpace some of the public military vehicles, right? And you can't they can no longer separate National Guard technology, so to speak, from regular services. They're going to have to integrate everything, because you have some pretty sophisticated hackers, disgruntled operators, right? You have operators who, let's go ahead and break this story. Think about this. Think of folks who have been special operations from all branches of service. But through this recent political war, they have chosen a side, right? They're utilizing their know-how for a cause that somebody recruited them for. And that's very dangerous, right? Imagine a Delta operator who's gone rogue.
That's scary.
Not a good thing.
That's not good at all.
Because Delta operators are trained. They're not trained to work as a group, but by themselves, do everything by themselves. And that's just not good.
What about air?
You have all these accidents with. Go ahead.
Air traffic control. That has to be a team effort, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, that's a coordinated effort, and it must be. You can't fail at that job, right? You can't do that. If you're too tired, you interpret some data wrong, or you make the wrong call, you could cost lives. You know, the frequency of these accidents has increased, what, about 400% in the last year. So
Yes.
it's just not good. It's not good. I believe that greed has a lot to do with that. We just got out of the airlines. They didn't look too good with all these failures with lithium batteries and explosions and things of that nature. They're trying to save money. They're firing everybody who would, tell them their terrible techniques, and it's catching up with them at the people's expense.
Mike, are you worried about rogue pilots uh, in the
Absolutely.
commercial? You know.
Absolutely. I'll tell you why. You've had, they do not print stories about this. You remember that guy that got a hold of an aircraft and he was flying it like he was in an aircraft simulator?
Yes. Yes. That was a few
You know
years
that,
ago. Yes. Yes.
right? Well, it happened right after that incident that the world saw. It happened again, and then it happened again, right? So you have these people again. There's a war happening right now. It was spawned by political tensions, and you have people who are loyal to one side or the other. Here's the issue, though: if you have a group of people and you make them believe in an ideology, they're going to go to war against the other side. They're going to do what's necessary because in their minds, they're going to think that's what it takes to save the nation. So if you have two opposing views, you have a war, and
Yeah.
both sides are going to do what they do. They're going to do whatever's necessary of what they think to save the nation. That's what's happening right now, and it's very dangerous.
Wow. Yeah. So you're concerned because we're so divided as a nation that division is spread out across um, our infrastructure, whether it be planes, trains, automobiles, um, power stations, nuclear
That's right.
facilities. I mean, military personnel. You're concerned about that, aren't you?
That's right. Because there have been too many accidents that are human. They're clearly somebody sabotaged something, right? Um, it's not stopping, and it's soon to escalate beyond some thought or some theory. It's soon to escalate. I believe it will escalate to a degree that people will actually begin to sabotage facilities, entire facilities, thinking there's no other recourse of action. I say that because you have a lot of people that are being questioned because they actually believe that America has ended. They actually believe that, for example, they believe that President Trump is the real evil Antichrist guy, and
No.
so they're going the extra mile to ensure whatever they believe in. That's very dangerous. It's very dangerous because if they think there's no reason to go forward and that everything is at stake, they're going to do whatever's necessary, right? Whatever's necessary for a continuation of their own people.
Yeah.
That's what it's come down to.
Mike, we've also got some reports that Mount St. Helens is either shaking or there's some volcanic ash or plumes being released. Is there anything to worry about there, or is there, or don't worry about that?
No, I believe that gas emissions
Yeah.
from many volcanoes are beginning to intensify, right? And again, here we are again. That's the slow but steady change in the earth. It's very difficult to track for some people because if they don't see an explosion right away, they'll say nothing is happening.
Yeah.
But the heat has been increasing inside the earth, right? And here's the cause again. Something is affecting our sun. Clearly, something is affecting our sun. Our
Okay.
sun then affects us. The more radiation or the more solar winds and materials that the sun ejects, the earth absorbs. As it absorbs all that radiation, it is redirected to the poles inside the planet, heating up the magma. The magma is being supercharged, so to speak. So in the deserts of Saudi Arabia, you have fires that have started from nowhere, right? I mean, they're burning and it's magma underneath, right? Glass is all around the mouth of these fires. vitrification has taken place. You have places like Alaska, where things are really about to get hot. Washington
Really?
State, you
Okay.
have ancient volcanoes waking up. Yeah, in Alaska, gases are starting to emit that nobody ever thought that would happen, this soon. You have places like Italy that continues. There's a continuation of a buildup. You have the Aegean Sea, which is waking up. You have certain dormant spots in the ocean that are superheated now, right? You have
Tonga?
cracks in the Atlantic that are opening up, cracks in the Pacific that are opening up, and magma is the primary cause of all of this.
So magma is what's causing all of these volcanic and all the volcanism and the cracks in the earth, like in the Atlantic Ocean and in down in Tonga and the what's running that fault line that's running underneath Italy, and Italy's already got a lot of volcanoes hanging around.
Yeah, they do.
And
In fact, they're about to evacuate. Italy is about to have
what?
mass evacuations.
No.
And I believe they've already had meetings. They set out the plans, and then within 2 weeks, I believe they're gonna really have to decide to either start evacuations right away or alert the some of the other citizens that live on the lip of the waters to get ready to go.
Now,
They have some real preparations to make.
is it because of volcanoes, eruptions are coming,
Yeah,
or earthquakes?
volcanoes. Volcanoes.
Is Rome in any kind of danger here?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it
They're
is.
not going to evacuate. I mean, are they going to?
No, but they'll put them on watch. One of the issues is if they, and this is real, if they have an evacuation, nothing happens during an ample amount of time.
Yeah.
Whoever called for that evacuation is going to jail.
Yeah, their head will roll.
Right.
There's no question about that. But
Right.
if they don't
So
do it and it blows,
people are going to die.
Yeah.
People are going to die. So I'm electing for the latter. I know they're not going to get everybody out. They're going to get some of the more obvious places. They've already evacuated some. They've already done that. You know that, don't you? They have actually cleared out certain parts of Italy around there. So it's already beginning. But
Really?
I do not believe they're going to get the mass majority of folks out. It's just not going to happen because it's not feasible. In the predictive method that they're trying to employ is not trustworthy enough.
So you're
Simply
saying there's some certain critical, important, what they would consider important people in Italy that they might have already moved over. Maybe they're put them on vacation over in Barcelona or somewhere.
They have moved people out of certain areas, and it won't be a playful subject here soon. The magma continues to intensify as far as its heat. Now, keep this in mind: as magma heats up, it's going to melt more and more rock. That's more and more magma. This process is continuing. It's not stopping. It's actually spreading. So that's where we are with that. Yeah.
All right. So when we're watching these things happening, Mike, and of course you mentioned the sun a minute ago, and it is a very, very major concern. There's plasma storm. They've been showing there's incredible plasma storms. There's two massive holes on the sun that are right now Earth facing. We're praying they don't do anything. I mean, what's going on, Mike, with the sun?
Well, a coronal hole like that, right? That indicates, let's say, a very tight winding of a rubber band, a magnetic band that will burst. At some point, it will burst. And it is pointed towards us. So naturally, the effects of well, there are several things in effect, but there is a good potential that something will be thrown our direction. But I'll tell you something. If the magnetosphere is in the right polarity to any CME ejection, it could be harmless, right? Or it could be devastating. So I'm going to let everybody know this. If the magnetic shielding is not polarized with a your lowest possible CME, some harmless CME ejection, right? Say the magnetosphere is not polarized to it. Do you not know that could be a Carrington event?
Really?
Yeah. If we can absorb, if the Earth cannot absorb all the radiation, right, and we're polarized in the opposite direction, you're looking at a bow shock, so to speak, right? Something that will just smash into us, overwhelm the magnetosphere, cause it to go into a chaotic mode, which is not really orientated, and then the surface of the Earth is going to be electrified a little bit, and that's from the smallest CME.
Hmm.
So no flare, just a CME, coronal mass ejection.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not polarized the right way, we're in trouble. So far, we have been polarized the correct way. So we're able to absorb quite a bit, which is why some of these CMEs, well, all these CMEs have been largely passive. The solar flares have been passive events. If we're polarized in the wrong way, we're in trouble. And everybody ought to keep in mind, we will have a magnetic flip, right?
Yeah. In other words,
That's going to
a
cause
pole
us to have
shift.
the wrong polarization.
Now, there's a
We're in
difference.
trouble.
There's
Yep.
a difference between a magnetic flip or a pole shift
That's right. That's
and
right.
a physical tilt.
That's right. We're talking about the magnetic shielding,
Okay.
right? Being
Okay.
polarized in the opposite direction. Now, here's the deal historically. We know that the Earth has gone through periods of upheavals that have lasted for, hundreds of years and then nothing, right? So peace, chaos, peace, chaos. We have been at peace this entire time. When the magnetic field lines begin to reorient themselves in the opposite polarity, the sun is not going to be friendly to the earth. I personally believe that's when everything goes downhill, because any type of CME is going to cause problems with the earth at that point. We have been in a time of peace. In other words, our shielding has been polarized in the right way to absorb everything the sun has and harmlessly utilize it for energy. But when it changes, when the magnetic field lines change, when we have this flip, not of the Earth, but of our poles, so magnetic poles, right? That's an indication our shielding is polarized in the opposite direction, and at that point, we're going to have chaotic years. I honestly believe that's part of the that is part of the end times, and it would perfectly describe many of the conditions that we would face during the time of that's described in Revelation, as well as some of the times that you can dig up by way of archaeology, right, and geology. You can see it in the earth, in the strata that we have gone through these moments. So here we go.
Wow. So this magnetic shield, which is our magnetic field, as
Mhm.
it weakens, we become more vulnerable to the coronal mass ejections and the plasma storms and the CMEs that come, the coronal mass ejections and anything else coming at us. But also it affects the volcanism, which in turn affects the oceans are being heated, which in turn creates a change in the oceanic currents, which in
Well,
turn
everything, yeah,
does and affects
everything,
the atmospheric
right?
currents and
But
then
but
the
think of this.
compression,
Yes, think of this though.
Okay.
Imagine if the magnetic field lines never weakened. If the shielding never weakened, it simply reversed polarity,
What would that
right?
mean? What does that mean? What would that
That means we'd be in trouble. That's what that means. In other words, look, part of the North and South Pole, one part is like negative, one part is like positive, right? And just like a circuit, if you take a negative wire and hook it to a positive wire, but it's hooked through some type of resistance, which would be the earth, you got a pretty good circuit. So no danger. If you hook positive to positive on your car battery, you're going to be in trouble.
Oh, you'll
That's a lot
blow
of
that thing
amperage.
up. Yeah, you'll blow it
Okay.
up. Okay.
Okay, there you go. So if we did not lose our shielding, but it simply reversed its polarity, then anything coming from the sun would instantly cause a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Poof. That's what we go through, right? So there are times in history when the heavens were quite dangerous. We're talking about for hundreds of years,
Mm,
not for 2 or 3 years, for hundreds of years.
mm.
There are known, you can look in some of the petrified trees and find that there was a period of 400 years that things were awful here. The sun did damage to everything. We know there's some sort of extinction event that decreases humanity a great deal and destroys civilizations, right? And nobody's given a good answer for that. You know,
Hmm.
what would destroy all civilizations, leaving ruins? Then they build up and wiped out again, then wiped out again, then wiped out again, until we have nothing but footers and columns and stone and things like that. I believe that the shielding, its reversal, has everything to do with that. And we're in the process now of our shielding changing its polarity. We're in that process right now.
How long does that
So it
process take,
doesn't
Mike?
have to weaken. We're in trouble. There's no determinate time, Pastor Paul. It could happen. From what I understand, it could take, it's already started, so it could take 10 years, right?
Okay.
It could take 100 years, or it could take 10 minutes. In this case, they know it's changing because the sun's effects on the surface of the earth are changing it rapidly. That's where our weather conditions are coming from. That's why the magma is overcharging, because the polarity, we're almost halfway through that flip, right?
So
It is changing.
anywhere between 10 minutes and 100 years. But that's sort of like what we do when we talk about the big one. Earthquakes, in San Andreas fault line, or the Cascadia subduction zone, or Tonga, blowing its top. Any time this could happen because of the pressure and the magma rising and the earth tilting and the magnetosphere weakening. Any of those things could really happen. So we really are living in the borrowed time. Would you say we're living in borrowed time?
Yeah, we're seeing it too. And since 2010, these events have exponentially increased. So what does that tell you? It's not going to take 100 years.
So it's not going to take 100 years.
It's not going to take 50 years. It's not going to take 50. It's not going to take 10 years.
Yeah.
It's not.
No.
It's not, because right now we're on a trend line for all this to have taken effect within the next 3 years.
Mike, I'm going to keep that in my mind for a minute, but I want to move over to another area. And you said, I remember this, maybe about 2 years ago or so, King Charles, when he took over the throne, he not only is the King of England, the British Empire, but he's also the governor or the head of the Church of England. Yesterday, and he's sick, and he's been going through, some type of treatment for cancer. He looks pretty rough. And the Pope of Rome, who had double pneumonia and was near death, is still in recovery. But yesterday, with no announcement, nobody knew it was going to happen, King Charles and his wife, Queen Camilla, on their 20th wedding anniversary, went to visit the Pope. We have a picture of it right here. You said, some things can't happen until there's a king. Now, I went to look and see, when's the last time that the King of England visited the Pope?
Uh-huh.
It was actually 1923 with King George V visited Pope Pius XI in the Vatican in 1923. It's been 102 years. Is there anything nobody knows, it was a closed door session. Was there anything you think happened? Was there anything had to be signed? Is there any kind of shifting that's going on in the world right here? Because, and here's why I'm asking before you answer, because King Charles sent a private letter to President Trump, personal handwritten letter, that he needs to come to England, and they're going to give him a state dinner. But this is interesting. Is there anything going on here?
Well, historically, Pastor Paul, you mentioned, to mention Pope Pius XI, he changed everything in starting in 1925. The Lateran Treaty of 1929 was a big deal, right? He essentially had the power over all religions during that time, and he's the one, Pope Pius XI is the one that actually began to employ powers against Soviet Russia during the time. He publicly took this active stance against Nazism and fascism and communism, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And persecution of Christians. But most importantly, the big shift, I know that happened, but the big shift was the establishment of the academy in 1936? The Science Academy.
Now
Right
that
now, we all know the
uh,
Vatican Science Academy is
yeah,
what they're interested in, correct?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? Think about that. We know
I
what
mean,
they're interested in.
They got the Lucifer telescope,
They're
and I mean,
looking out in space that's in one direction, right? They're looking at this one direction all this time. They're
yeah,
inviting
yeah,
people down, only the elite to come down and look at it, right?
that's
And
right.
so they have secrets concerning that. And all that was initiated in 1936. That's when it began. So, and that's after Pope Pius. Of course, they had that meeting. So the Pontifical Academy of Sciences was a big deal, right? That was a big deal, right? That was a that was
Wow.
a that was a real shift in everything
So was there a
because that
shift?
modernized everything.
Okay, so you're saying in 1936, which was just before the World War II, that there was a shift in the world order. Is that what I'm hearing you say? That there was a shift because of the Pope, the King,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there was a new king. Okay, George V died, and George VI took over
Uh-huh.
1936. Okay, and that's before, and then of course 1936, 37, I think it was. Hitler was running around, and Stalin was running around, and the what's his name, Chamberlain from the UK came back with the
Yeah,
papers saying, "I've
yeah,
got a peace deal with Hitler."
yeah, yeah.
But you're saying something would happen. There was a global shift.
Yeah. He actually combated totalitarianism. So that was a very dangerous time to do that too, but he did so openly. And but his establishment of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences was the biggest deal ever because it moved everything into a very different direction, right? Everything. And note at the same time, Hitler was on the opposite side of the spectrum. He was the one that was doing his little,
Mm-hmm.
devil work and devil
Mm-hmm.
development of devil vehicles and everything else he could get his hands on. So that was a change in time, and it was so profound that America initialized Project Paperclip. Right, that's when they would put a paperclip by the names of those. They would give absolute unconditional entrance into the
Nazis,
USA. The scientists.
Nazis.
That's right. That's right. To continue their scientific discoveries and their scientific work, and nobody really knew about all that. Right. So think
Mike,
about that. How could you take a criminal, right, that you stand against and allow him absolute entrance, royal entrance into the USA just because of the science they knew? And we know that it wasn't for defense,
no,
right? It'd be something else if they wanted everything Hitler developed militarily, but that's not what they did. That is not what they did. When
no.
they brought those scientists over here, they immediately began to develop big rockets where
The
they could go
space
out into
program.
space. That makes no sense. That
No.
makes no sense, right? But that's what they did. That's
So
what they did.
let's see if we can put this together. So Nazi Germany, we know what they were doing with the Jews. They're trying to exterminate them, but they were doing a whole lot more than that. They had these brilliant scientists that we, the United States, recognized and brought over and put in Operation Paperclip, like Werner von Braun. We brought these guys over to help us build our own space station, NASA, and our okay. But we did it with the help of the Vatican. How many Nazis escaped Germany through the Vatican, getting their names changed, getting baptized? I mean, there was all kinds of stuff going
That's
on.
right.
Is that why? I mean, is that why? Because of the what you call the pontific scientific.
Pontifical Academy of Sciences. That's when,
So you're saying the Vatican and the United States were working hand in hand in science, exploration of space, and scientific development. That this was all, and they used the German scientists to help them accomplish the goal.
Absolutely. That's why, Ford was, you had companies in the US that were building both, Hitler's vehicles and American vehicles, and it was all jumbled up. It was all jumbled up. But their main objective was to get into space, was to do something in space. That was their main objective. And they were willing to do anything to get hold of those scientists who had some major accomplishments. They were willing to do anything to incorporate those guys, and I mean with royal treatment.
South America.
You're talking about folks who are evil. That's why when people celebrate von Braun, I do not.
I
I
say,
cannot, because I know what he stood for.
yeah.
I'm not going to listen to a word he said. I'm not going to celebrate his secretary either for saying, well, von Braun told us how they're going to end them. I'm not trusting that guy, right? Because his stuff is not panning out. And no, I'm not doing that. But
I
these
like that.
guys were inherently evil, right?
Yeah, I agree
Which
with
is why,
that. I agree
see, that's why
100%.
honestly, Pastor Paul, that's why I have a lot of enemies, because the Bible remains my anchor
Amen.
for things and not mankind's stuff, because they're always going to do stuff. But what we're in the middle of now is quite profound. It is
So,
quite profound.
okay, so now we have to also include Argentina because
Yes.
obviously a lot of
Yeah.
the Nazis made it to Argentina, including probably Hitler. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that Hitler might have made it to Argentina and lived there till 1961 or something. What's your
If
thoughts?
if someone were to do their homework on Argentina, right,
Mm-hmm.
they would find a very specific race of people that are there, that are ancient and old. When I say old and ancient, I mean like from the beginning, ancient and old, right? You're going to hear about coffins and still a living king in the coffin. How can a living king be, 1,200 years old in a coffin?
Gilgamesh?
That only the elite of the world. This thing can speak, but it does not move its mouth or anything. It's almost like being in a seance or something when they get near this
Are we
coffin.
talking about
But
Gilgamesh?
you know what, Pastor Aki? I have not looked too
Okay.
deep into that, but I'll say this:
Okay.
the race of people it was written about in conjunction with this is what really spawned or led some people who did some of the newer translations about the Sumerian text right to Argentina. Argentina is full of things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the difference. Here's the difference. Unlike the USA and all these other places where you hear about it, you can't see it. Anybody who goes there to actually see it, they never come back.
In
And they
Argentina?
never come back. No, they never come back. And people who are near that area, uh, people who have gone to investigate, all of them seem to say that it's like something is invading your mind as soon as you get around that place. There were some missionaries that went down there not for that reason. They didn't even know about it. And they ended up fighting their own thoughts until they got out of that place. So there's some horrific spiritual stories about that place, which don't let you know that something is there, right?
Right, right.
And
So,
that's where Hitler went. Hitler. It was said that he went there. A lot of his merry men went there, but who knows what's down there? I do know this: that it has governmental protections from around the world. Why? For
in
what reason?
Argentina, that area,
Yeah.
yeah. So it
Why?
could be a portal there. I mean, there's some kind of.
I think you know what I think.
Mhm.
No, I don't think a portal's there. I
Okay,
think something is there. I think something
okay,
physically is
okay.
there. I think something physically
Well, do
is
you
there.
think there's something physically up in Alaska with those doors? Is that Alaska or is that
Who?
Argent? Or is
Nobody.
that the
Nobody.
Arctic?
That's the Arctic, and
Okay.
nobody's gone beyond those doors, right? They can't really. They know the doors can slide, but those doors are like it's like you open the outer set and there's a inner set. But those doors are impossible, still made out of a material that nobody can reproduce. You can't reproduce
So
that stuff.
these are ancient doors.
They're old. Yeah, they're very old. In fact, as things continue to melt, they already know what they're facing. As things continue to melt, somehow they're going to have to do some of their tricks to keep people from really bombarding that place. It's already off limits. Nobody can go to those places. Nobody. Nobody. Right. Um, and then of course you can't bring weapons in a certain circle inside there, no matter where you're from. Isn't that interesting? Nobody can go
Yeah,
there.
that's really
Nobody.
interesting.
You can have all the money in the world if you're not going to go there unless they allow you to go there. Right?
So there's something ancient, something dark,
We do know
something demonic.
viruses.
Okay,
I
viruses.
think it's demonic. I
Yep.
think it's demonic. I think primarily it's from the some of the tales that people read in the Bible with the fallen angels.
Yep.
I believe that it's a land frozen over that never really unthawed. But there are too many maps of the Arctic that are just too old. If you found a map, right, underneath something that took you, I think it's 42 years to dig up. And you finally got to the bottom and you find a map. And that map depicts all the continents almost perfectly. You can't just throw that away. You can't say
No,
it's made up. You can't do that.
no.
And so they find things like this all the time, things that have been underneath, underneath these structures for hundreds of years. They dig them up. They have these 40-year excavation sites. Get to the bottom or get near the bottom, from China to America to the Middle East to South America. It's the same story. They start to dig up these maps of this world without ice. They depict specific animals, warnings, places you shouldn't go to. The ancients, giant tribes, all this stuff is in there. They won't, well, with the exception of England, they really won't let people see them unless you go to England to go to one of their museums and really take a look at this stuff. But it's all pretty consistent. It's
All right.
saying the same
All right,
thing.
now, Mike, you're really good. You've been great about talking about cloning and genetic experiments and different things. Okay, so we've been told we have this wolf. I mean, what was it called? The dire wolf, or what do they call it? It was extinct. It's been extinct, forever. They took a tooth and maybe some DNA, and they are saying they have created and have brought this wolf back from extinction. And that with this capability, they believe they can bring back the woolly mammoth next. Mike, what is going on here? I mean, do they really have this capability to do this?
Can I be candid?
Yes, please.
Number one, they're lying.
Okay.
That's number one. Did they bring it back? Yes. But keep them. They just told the world they bought back some dire wolves. Let's get the story straight. First of all, and they say, "Hey, we just bought them back." That's what people have.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
These wolves are old. Just so you know that. The two males are old. The female is old, right? Now, a long time ago, I mentioned they would have to cover up some of the chimeric work that they had been doing, right? And they would come out with stories so that people could buy them hook, line, and sinker to kind of, clear the waters. Pastor, they've been doing things they shouldn't. For example, there's one example. I can use this example because it kind of slipped out there, but there's a pig human, right? A pig human.
No, right? A pig human.
A pig human.
No.
And people are going to start reading and hearing stories, official stories about pig humans, right? There are other species that never left. They're like the dire wolf. I do not believe it ever left. There are places that are most people cannot get to. There are either parts of national parks, things of that nature, and they just cover up things, Pastor Paul, and they come up with these stories to kind of throw people off.
Okay,
right?
But this pig human, now that's going to be some kind of genetic. Is that some kind of experiment that went on?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is, to see what they can do, and it was successful. So there's a thing called a big human, but it does not stop there. In Russia accomplished quite a bit. Germany accomplished quite a bit. The USA has, they have all the techniques that these guys used, and people are going to start learning about these declassified papers that depict the processes, with very little is redacted. But yes, they had pig humans. Now, they're not going to release whether they allowed these things to come to maturity or not. But I have to remind everybody, back in 2000, I believe it was 2017, there was a set of papers it was loosely covered, but you had chimeras who were fighting for equal rights.
Chimeras.
They wanted off a specific island, and they were fighting for human rights. Chimeras.
Now why would that
ever be out there?
That's half human, half primate. Primate, maybe.
Well, mixed with any type animal.
Okay.
Human DNA with
any kind
DNA,
of animal. Okay.
Human DNA with spider DNA. Human DNA with what was the other one? Fish, some type of fish DNA. Human DNA with alligator DNA. Human DNA with all this weird stuff. all this weird stuff. Well, come to find out, Pascal, you can actually inject. I know a lot of people think they have a lizard mind, right? That's a spoof. I wish
Okay.
people wouldn't
Okay.
say that.
Okay. Don't say
Here's
that.
why I say that. Here's why I say that, because these stories pop up, and there's a part of the brain that looks like part of the lizard's brain, right? It looks like that. It does not mean that's what it is. That's not what it means. We have a creator, and he designed all these things.
Amen.
So his design is going to be in everything, is it not? So some things are going to be similar. It does not mean that we're walking around with lizard
No,
minds.
no, 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 no,
You
no,
know,
no, no.
so that's not real. In fact, they already knew what the races, what the differences of the races
But
truly
if
are.
we go back, if we look back into the, in Genesis chapter 6, that the fallen angels did mix the DNA, mingled the seed
With everything.
with everything. I mean, we're not shocked. I mean, they corrupted not only man, but it says that all flesh.
Yeah.
It
And beast.
and
Yes, it beast too.
yes, yes.
Beast too.
So why are we shocked
Right.
if scientists today are mixing the seed
Right.
with humans and goats, which the Bible talks
That's
about
right.
a satire in the Bible, a man,
Yeah.
half goat. I mean, they could mix humanity DNA with just about anything and everything because
That's right.
there's a design, there's a sacred geometry or a sacred genetic code that God created when he created all things. But Lucifer and the fallen angels are also privy to this. And that's why it happened, I think, in Genesis 6. And as it was Jesus says it was the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man. So do you believe that we're in that days of Noah, that we've come back, it's come back full circle?
I believe that people cannot recognize. They wouldn't know what a Nephilim really was.
That's
You see,
true.
in today's world, you have all these races, right? It
Yeah.
is a known fact. It is a known fact that you know how people talk about triple helix DNA and how they try to make that a myth.
Yeah.
People ought to do some reinvestigation on DNA, right? Stop going to the mainstream and start looking at the published papers, because this mainstream stuff will only interpret the published papers. Go to the published papers. That's where you find out what's what, because a lot of people they don't know, they're not going to take the time to go in to read those published papers, but that's where all the scientists are going to get their info from, these published papers. And if there are some published papers out there that have been confirmed too many times concerning our DNA not being what they're telling everybody, it's a little more to it. Also, the water carries the main strand of DNA, and it is almost instantaneous in its development. There's a characteristic of water, period. They had an experiment where they played a frequency in the ocean, right? And DNA began to spontaneously form. Okay. DNA spontaneously forms in the ocean once you play specific frequencies. This experiment, I believe, ended up costing about 88, what was it? Not $88 billion total, right? And it took many years, many scientists, but it was replicated. It was done over and over again, and they have the mechanism obviously to it. Now everything has water in it, from plants to human beings, right?
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And they know that frequencies affect water, and frequencies thus affect you, and they affect me, they affect plants. And kind of like a plant does not like they like classical music. They grow 300% quicker and then when no frequency is introduced. But they don't like rock and roll or rap, right? They decrease their growth in the presence of rock and roll and rap. They do. That's true.
So
That's true.
you're saying that if we set a plant out here and play praise and worship music or play certain types of jazz or something that's it's a little more mellow and a little more uplifting, it will affect the plant's growth?
Yes, it'll stimulate it. It will stimulate. It's kind of like some of the trees in South America. This is not made up. This is
I mean,
real.
I've heard this. I mean,
If
so
the
tell me about
trees
it.
in Yeah, if the trees in South America, right, if they're not getting enough water, they begin to communicate a chemical signal to all the other trees. Then all at once, fastball, they release a chemical into the atmosphere, and it starts raining. The tree is a known fact that trees make it rain in South America.
So, okay, let me just say
And
this.
that's something. So when it's dry, guess what
Mhm.
happens? When it's
Right.
dry, everything vibrates, right?
Mhm.
It becomes noisy.
Yeah,
When it's dry,
because
everything
there's
vibrates.
less.
It's noisy
Well, there's less moisture in the air. I mean,
to
everything's
absorb the
thicker.
frequencies. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's
Okay,
right.
okay. Now
So
I
when it
do
starts
know.
after it rains, it goes away.
I do
Yeah.
know, and I know this. And don't say I'm running around talking to the trees, but I'm just being honest. If you speak to a plant, I mean, I know somebody's going to say, "Oh no." If
No,
you,
it's real. They
no,
proved it.
it's
They already proved it. Yep.
if you show love to God's plants, they feel that love. And if you're
Yeah.
negative, they feel that. I mean, am I right? I'm not off the wall here. I'm not off the
No,
wall.
because look. I'll tell you, everybody knows this. What I'm about to say. People always look at things like that and say, that's impossible. They don't like to talk of angels. They don't like to talk of supernatural beings or anything else. But if you're in a store shopping and somebody's outside the store staring at you, why is it that you turn around and look at the person staring at you?
Yeah, because you feel
What
uncomfortable.
mechanism is that?
I
Uh-huh.
don't
How does
know.
that work?
Yeah.
So you're not looking at the person. You're not thinking about the person. You don't even know the person yet. There's a connection, is there
Yep.
not?
Yes, there
Right?
is.
So just remember that connection with everything. It is there. People may not realize it, recognize it, but it is there. If you walk into a house and or kids are good for when people were kids and their parents argued, do you not know the child can feel the atmosphere?
Oh yeah. It
Right?
affects the atmosphere.
That's right. That's right. You can automatically tell it. They try to scientifically explain this thing. Oh, you're empathetic and hypersensitive. Duh. That means we have a connection with everything. We can perceive a language beyond speech. We can perceive communication beyond speech.
I
We
know
can
now. I
perceive the
know.
being of another. Right?
Look, I know dogs and cats and animals that you can squirrels, whatever. You can talk to animals. I'm not Dr. Doolittle, but I know that you can communicate, and they understand that you're communicating. They feel your vibe, or your aura, or your anointing. I also believe that the plants do too, and not only can they feel it, but they say people have a green thumb, but actually, what people are doing is they're showing tender, loving care. They're watering it. They're talking to it.
That's
They're
inspiring.
nurturing.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
real. I mean, these plants are real, and
Yeah.
everything that God created is good. I mean, He did not create anything bad. Everything He created was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
We can
Can I
corrupt it.
get, we can. Can I add something else?
Yeah, go ahead.
God gave humanity authority, right?
Yes, dominion. Yes,
If we love something, are we not giving it approval and encouraging it to continue
absolutely.
by our authority? When you love something, right, you're giving it approval to continue
Mm-hmm.
and you're encouraging it to continue. That's you granting authority to creation of which God put you over. I know people like to explain it and say, everything is sound, everything is this. No, actually, everything is light, and there would be no sound without photons. And so, but everything is light,
I
right?
mean,
Not
geez.
actually sound.
Okay,
Everything
okay,
is light.
okay. So now, and so somebody will say, "Oh, Begley, you've lost your mind." No, but let's go biblical then. Jesus walks up to this fig tree and says, "This thing ain't doing no good. This thing is not bearing any fruit. Cut it down." And the disciples said, No, wait. Let's give us another year." And Jesus said, "Okay, you want grace for this? You want to show some love? You can try to keep it alive and see if it starts bearing fruit. I'll let it go." Jesus walked up to another tree one time and just cursed it. He just cursed it. It died instantly. I mean, he just
Yep.
killed it. I
Yep.
mean, so he could speak life into things, but he could also condemn things. So life and death are in the power of the tongue. We think about that as being ourselves by our speech, which it is, but it also applies to the plants and to the creatures that God has created. I mean, am I off here, or am I kind of on the right?
No, yeah, that's good because if you speak life, right? Of course, if we can't speak death of another person because
No,
unless God gave
no,
us authority over something,
right.
but when we speak death, look at what we're doing. If we speak death and we let that out, we're actually not authorizing anything around us to have life. And so, guess what? Everything that does not have life is going to come into that environment of death. And they're going to begin to act on your permission. Demonic entities can't do anything. You know, it's so funny that Jesus said, I give you powers to tread upon scorpions and serpents,
Yep.
and nothing, and of all power over the devil, and nothing will by any means hurt you. Well, that means Satan cannot do a thing to anybody. He cannot, demons can't do a thing to anybody unless permission is granted, right? Small kids and things like that, they have a covering, which is their parents, because God made it that way, right? Now, parents who neglect prayer and things of that nature, there are going to be problems with the kid. But if you have a parent that's praying over a child, when something opposes that child, there's always some sort of supernatural intervention, right? But the opposite is true for those who don't pray for children. Something is always happening with them. But to speak life into something is to grant it life. We have that. God gave us authority over all this stuff, and spirits respond to that authority. They will act within that authority we give. So a demon is happy when people speak death because it can operate. An angel is then employed when we speak God's word
That's
into
true.
anything or speak life, and they go to
Absolutely.
work. So they actually, you know, they make things happen. They're the hidden element that makes things happen. God gives that command. He can do it himself, but he made the angels for that purpose. And they will act within the word of God because it's written that God watches over his word to perform it,
Amen.
right? So he will perform every word that belongs to him when it comes to an authorized vessel. But he also told us even the people who don't have a relationship with him would be able to cast out devils and demons by authority, didn't he? Because if that weren't the case, it would never say, they're going to ask him, didn't we cast out, didn't we do this in your name and do that in your name and do this? He'll say, yes, but depart from me, you worker of iniquity. Now, see, that
Wow.
gets me. That means a worker of iniquity can use their authority to employ those elements God already put in place. His word will always be watched over. But death is the same way. If a person goes around speaking death, here come those who are of death or darkness. They're coming to execute. You just gave them room to operate when you speak death. So if somebody wants to, if they don't want death in their home, don't let it come out of your mouth, right?
Amen
Whether
to
by
that.
whisper, whether by any, don't let it come out of your mouth.
Don't let
And
it.
they cannot work. They can't work that way.
Mike, there's a couple things. There's 50 hippos that died in the Congo, and it's anthrax. But now there's a bunch of buffalo that died there too. And I just got a question: Ebola, cholera, monkeypox, anthrax, everything. It seems like different, new, uh, comes out of the Congo. Is it? Is somebody testing stuff down there? I mean,
Of course they are. Of course they are. That those places, the places in there's so many level 4 facilities all over the earth, right?
level
It's
four.
ridiculous.
Yeah, that's
Level 4
labs. So okay,
facilities.
so they're
Yep.
labs. Okay.
That's dangerous labs. And they go to isolated places like that, right? So
Yeah.
the human factor is not involved, and then that contagion can't go everywhere. But they have researched so much that a lot of people would not believe that half of what we're dealing with now was actually a product of the 40s. That's how it works. So they
Wow.
start working with this stuff in the 40s, and of course bugs will get a hold of it and everything, and it starts going around, and we end up having to have these multiple campaigns to contain what we played with in the 40s. They can literally make you can literally order a combative virus now. That, and I mean different components. If your laboratory, you can say, I need a virus that will invade the neural system of a human being and give it 7 days gestation and replication and make sure it is non-traceable after 22 days. They actually have the ability, because they have broken down all the components, you can order up a virus like that. Today, you can do that today, right
Wow.
now, today. So all these experiments have yielded um, a nightmare, so to speak.
So
But these viruses like anthrax in the Congo and things like that, I'll tell you something. That's not what keeps me up at night. What keeps me up at night are some of the viruses that are already within humanity that they don't even know about. See, I'll say something. It's only by grace and mercy that we're not, a plague has not taken all of us in the first place. We're infected by something already, right? But it's not doing anything. In
is
fact, we're infected
are you
by
saying
hundreds. hundreds of things that are not doing anything.
Dormant. It's laying dormant.
That's right. They're already in our bodies. And what bothers me is that there are people out there that know what the trigger is, right? And to even hear about that is you want to find out who, but it's impossible to find out who by natural means. That's what keeps me up, because if the Lord so desired, we already have something within us that can kill us. Number two is this: well, everybody's looking for a massive army to attack some other massive army. People underestimate the power of insects.
It's true.
I'm telling you,
it's
they
true.
do. They
I mean, we
underestimate the power
know
of insects.
mosquitoes carry unbelievable viruses and are being used and are being manipulated and genetically being modified. I mean, yeah, you're right.
Even the ones that aren't. If a group of bullet ants, right? If they decided to do what they did, I believe it was like 52 years ago, you can't do anything against that. A bullet ant is something, if it bites you, it feels like you're shot by a bullet. And then that feeling goes away. An hour later, you're shot by another bullet. And it keeps happening that way for about 30 days. So imagine if a bunch of those overran a state, what could that state do? It's already happened in villages, and there were no survivors, right? It's already happened. It happens throughout time, where you're talking about millions of these. That bullet ant's about 1.5 inches long. So imagine millions of those things all over the place. And you're not going to kill it with raid either, right? Imagine pestilence, like a species of flea or something like that would just start replicating and start taking things over. Humanity is blessed, and they're not looking at what could actually take them out. So I believe in this one thing. David picked up the most insignificant thing to take down the worst foe of that day, which was Goliath. The insignificant things of this world, God did say he would use I'm paraphrasing, that he would use the insignificant things of this world to confound the wise.
Yes.
Now, if he has that principle, why wouldn't he do that for major things? Why wouldn't he continue to do something like that? So maybe that's why the spider migration is happening to America. And all of a sudden, it kind of halted. The cold weather shears are keeping the spiders from coming up here. When that cold weather goes away, they're coming. They're coming. We're talking houses covered by spiders. Right? You wake up and you walk right into a web or something like that. And the Lord knows, I don't like spiders. I don't like spiders. But we're looking at times like that. You can't even come out in your home because those things are poisonous. The type I'm talking about is quite poisonous, and it's not little. It's pretty big.
Wow. And again, I say wow. Well, okay, so there's a lot of things that are taking place. It's a combination. It's a convergence, and we didn't even talk about Russia, Ukraine. We didn't even talk about China surrounding Taiwan. We didn't even talk about what's going on in the Middle East with Turkey and
Turkey showing its colors.
I mean, look at this. Israel went in there and blew up those 3 bases that Turkey had went and visited, and now Turkey and Israel are having talks right now they say to avoid clashes in Syria. But I mean, Turkey is definitely showing their. Can you give us some information on this, Mike?
Yeah, well, everybody knows I don't really side with Turkey much. I don't trust them.
Me neither.
Not from the beginning. I didn't trust them. But Turkey is making its move. Why? Because take note that before he did that, he had discussions with Putin. He had discussions with Iran.
Yes.
Right? What was he doing talking to Iran in the first place?
He's NATO. Right? So he's supposed to be NATO.
So you have all these people who, in the public's eye, they do one thing, but behind closed doors, they coordinate. They're coordinating. And believe me, Israel is the target. Israel will always be the target. Right?
Yep.
That's becoming more and more obvious. Saudi Arabia is not as loyal as people. They're going to be wiped off the face of the earth. And Jordan is now beginning to fight the wrong fight.
They're siding with the wrong side.
That's right. You would think that Israel would have true allies. I'll tell you something. The USA is the only true ally of Israel. And that's because of our faith, right?
Yep.
So in the ideology and the constitution of all these places, America must be burning. and Israel will then be attacked. That's what they're after. Everything they're doing is going to point to that, right? It's going to point to that. So I propose this. They're going to come after us first. They're going to activate everything they can activate within this country to go after us.
They have to.
And President Trump really has something on his hand. I know he's trying to get the country back together and level things out. Pascal, this guy is under a threat that no other president has actually been under. Despite, people call him evil, this, that, and the other. Well, they ought to look at Macron, quit looking at Trump. But Trump is in a fight. He's in a fight of fights. He really is in a fight of fights. Macron is one that has agreed to split the land of Israel.
Yes, he
is.
And
to by force, because they're not going to do it peaceably. They're going to do what they do by force. They're going to disarm Israel. I'm telling you, that's coming. They're going to disarm that place.
You said it. You've been saying it.
Force.
And here, I'm holding it up. France could recognize Palestinian state in June. Emmanuel Macron said he's going to make the announcement. In other words, he don't have the power to do it, but in a way he does. Because he's the head of the EU. He's pushing every day he turn around. He's talking about splitting up Israel, parting the land, creating a two-state. Yep. Yeah, he's evil.
Pastor, I tell you, Lord, forgive me, but that guy has got something going on. Because some of these leaders are actually married to their sisters. Or their aunts or something like that. So when you have that type of thing going on, it's part of they're from these ritualistic families, right? Ritualistic families.
Yeah.
You have to get nosy behind court docs, and you'll see it. Just start looking into court docs that they try to keep out of the mainstream media. You'll begin to see things you never thought you'd see before. You can't speak about them, of course, because YouTube will cancel you.
Right.
But they do. There's some lawsuits.
We got to look into this.
You don't make up a lawsuit. Make up these things and somebody fight that lawsuit with $300 million, $1 billion, and it keeps going. So some of these people are absolutely corrupt.
We'll check
evil.
into it.
That's evil.
That's bad. Mike, this has been one of the most interesting shows ever. Okay. It is. But everything you talked about is actually taking place. That's what makes it so interesting. I mean, it's actually taking place. So yeah, I'm going to look into some of that.
These are wonky times.
Yeah.
It's closing, Pastor Paul.
It's
closing. It's closing.
Mike, I appreciate it.
By the way, I got to tell you this.
Okay.
Next week, I may not be here Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. So I just got to let you know that. I'll have to let you know that Wednesday, okay? Because I may not be here Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. But when I come back, boy, will there be a story to tell. But I just may not be here Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
So you might not be here next Thursday.
Right.
You'll let me know on Wednesday because you might be.
Yes.
So in other words, you might.
Yeah, I might be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll check in. Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate for the heads up, and we'll keep an eye on that. We'll touch base on Wednesday and see how it works out. Okay. Mike, thank you so much for being with me tonight. Thank you.
Pastor Paul, God bless you. God keep you. Keep going, brother. Keep going, brother. God bless you for all you do.
I'm going to do it. Thank you so much.
All right.
God bless.
God bless.